Number 7 I'd like to highlight is the amazing Light team, as I call them. That's Alan Light, who studies the neurobiology and pain pathways, and now he's kind of moved over into understanding about the neurobiology of fatigue, and he's mainly an animal researcher. He's become interested in how his science might help us develop a lab test for symptoms of fibromyalgia and CFS. Wouldn't that be incredible? To be able to have a test in the lab to show that you have pain and fatigue. And his wife, Kathy Light, Dr. Light, has for years studied how the autonomic nervous system is abnormal in people with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And one day after they moved here to Utah, they realized maybe their fields had crossed paths and they could do work together. And I swiped this picture of Kathy from the Seafoods Association website just so I'd have a picture of her. You can see Kathy and Alan have a lot of energy. They're married, by the way, and they're both researchers. And Suzanne talked about their study just a little bit, but in this exercise study, the patients have their blood sampled and then they're asked to exercise for 25 minutes on a bike. Not a graded exercise, but to just do continuous exercise for 25 minutes on a bike. And then their blood is analyzed for biomarkers that might demonstrate their symptoms. And I'm going to show you this slide again. They looked at many different research markers that have to do with receptors for pain and fatigue, for the autonomic nervous system, and for inflammatory markers. And when you look at the normal patients, you can see that these markers are normal at baseline. They exercise, and then at each interval, 30 minutes, 8 hours, 24 and 48 hours, when their blood is drawn again, there's really not very much activity. And these are normal sedentary patients. When you look at the patients with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, you can see that immediately after 30 minutes on the bike, 25 minutes on the bike, within 30 minutes, these markers of pain and fatigue and other dysfunction are obvious, completely obvious. And again, this was compared with another disease state with multiple sclerosis, and those same findings were not there. Well, and then they also looked at it in healthy, fit patients and had them exercise as hard as possible. And you can see that you get some of those markers to go up when healthy people exercise intensely, but nothing compared to patients with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Their findings were published on the cover of the Journal of Pain last November. Since then, more than 200 patients have been studied. About half of those are healthy controls, and more than 60 patients with CFS and fibromyalgia have completed this protocol. And what we're hoping is to look at subsets. For example, we did 15 patients with fibromyalgia that really don't meet criteria for CFS. That means people who have fibromyalgia, but they're able to maintain a fairly normal schedule, working, exercising. They went off all their medications. Every one of these patients came back and told me in the office it was the hardest thing they'd ever done. They were well-compensated patients, went off all their medicines, went and did the study, and then had to wait for several days, to do these blood draws before they could go back on their medications. But we're seeing a different profile of patients who don't have the fatigue. I want to say that the CFS patients who participated, some of them had to go back for their blood draws in a wheelchair. And we have continued to look at different subsets, and we're hoping that very important information about different subsets that separate this great heterogeneous group will start to become apparent. And I want to say that the grant requests that were submitted this year were all turned down. So that was very discouraging, and they don't have the funds they want to go ahead. I'm just going to show you a little bit about these additional subsets. On top here is one of my patients that is very, very ill with CFS. In the middle is the group of patients. You know that one that showed all the findings in our first study? They pale in comparison to her, the one patient. And when she just did a functional capacity exam for her disability, she became so ill after the exercise they required of her that she was sick for many weeks. And her long-term disability was revoked because someone filmed her taking out the garbage and doing some light tasks around her house. So this kind of objective data is going to become very important as diagnostic studies down the road. Here's another patient that looks more like the group. This is a professional male, middle-aged male, who is disabled by his chronic fatigue syndrome. And this patient on the left, patient 090916, This is compared to the group with CFS and fibro down below. We had to make them so small they don't even look positive because his tests went so high at 48 hours that it was 50 times normal. So you can see that when we start to look at individual tests, we're going to be able to start to study why people are different with these kind of markers. So this research has great potential, and I commend the patients who put their body on the bike to go up and complete this study. And it was a hard study. I went up and did the study as one of the controls, and I was kind of tired when I got done having my blood drawn 5 times. So, all right, number 8, just a brief reference to XMRV studies. XMRV and the murine leukemia viruses. This is some of the newest, most exciting information going on right now in the field of CFS, trying to sort out what this means. Well, I want to tell you that in a 1-week period, we called 100 people from my office. We reached 100 people in 5 work days, and the same 100 people went up to ARUP and had their blood drawn the next week. In 10 working days, we had recruited 100 patients with CFS, and they had volunteered to go up and have their blood drawn and fill out forms. This is just unprecedented. When people do clinical trials, they may take several years or months to recruit a small number of patients. So the volunteerism and the willingness to participate is just tremendous among our patients. $5,000 was donated to OFFER, specifically to help support the laboratory costs of the XMRV research up at the University of Utah. This was donated after a fundraising drive in December. So people like you donated money to further this research. And we're waiting to see down the road what we learned from this research. But I'm confident that we're going to make a place in the history of science with our results, whether they're positive or negative, because this is a very important and well-designed study. Study number 9, or research area number 9, is the biobank, and that Suzanne talked about. And this is the project kind of organized by the CFIDS Association nationally to have patients with CFS donate their blood and their information anonymously to remain in a bank where research can be done. And we decided to help with this, so we recruited 50 patients, so 50 people from my practice donated their blood and their biological information. Then we had a really hard task, is we had to find 50 matched healthy controls. They had to match the patients in zip code and gender and age. And that was a project, because getting people who aren't involved in this illness to donate their blood and fill out medical surveys was a challenge. And when my office ran out of ideas about how to recruit patients, I want to tell you that 2 women volunteered to find these controls for us. And they got on the phone, they opened their date books and called their friends and had blood drawing parties at their house. And my lab technician went to the house, and one night there were 7 people and the other night there were 8 people or something like that. And these healthy friends of theirs, who we carefully matched from the date book, their zip code and their age, and of course we knew they were their gender, so they could finish out and be the 50 controls that were part of our study. There are many, many other instances I want to say, and there was a young woman at BYU. Her name's Amanda Jensen. She had a family member with CFS. She got online, went to the OFFER website. She'd never met me, and wrote to me by email and said, "I want to come be your research assistant this summer." And for 2 months, she worked 30 hours a week and came to my office and really made a difference in our ability to get some of this research done, particularly that XMRV study. Also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the website Phoenix Rising, but it's a website, very active advocacy site. And they realized, it's kind of a long story, that my computer system in the research department was being held together by Band-Aids, and that we were having a problem, getting a good database. So they did a fundraiser online and raised money in a 1-day fundraiser to help buy computers for my research department. So you can see there are many ways you can get involved. You can be a volunteer, you can donate your time, you can donate your blood, you can donate money. In fact, in the last 5 years, more than 1,500 people have made a personal effort to move this field forward just in my circle. my office and my research. And I estimate if you add the patients from Dr. Okafuji's lab and from Dr. Lee Smith's lab, what if we just estimate an additional 1,000 from each one of those groups? That would be 3,500 people in Utah who have volunteered. In my group, this is about a third were control patients or well people, volunteers, who came to further the cause. 2/3 are people suffering with CFS and fibromyalgia. They show courage and commitment. They expose themselves to additional pain, fatigue, and general discomfort as their contribution to science. So patients and researchers have helped get effective fibromyalgia drugs FDA approved and on the market. This has helped legitimize the disorder and educate medical providers. Significant and original contributions to the medical literature have come from Utah researchers and volunteers. So I'd like to issue a challenge to all of you. First, I want to thank everyone for what you've done, and I want you to be proud of what Utah has done to move the field forward in terms of research, and I want to issue a challenge to stay involved. You can advocate politically, you can always donate money, you can enroll in trials, you can do the things that are within your own capability. You can write articles, you can research, you can be part of it yourself, and I would challenge you to do that. And thank you very much.